Hello, everyone. I'm Timo Hirvonen. I'm the VP of Solutions at Oivan, based in Finland. We have today a webinar with our good partner vendor, SSH Communications, about the privileged access. And we will have here as a main speaker, David Wishart from SSH, and he will tell about what is privileged access, why do we need it, what are the challenges, and how to solve those. And he will give a practical demonstration as well. Before we go to the topic, I have a few words about what is Oivan. We've been in the business more than 20 years. We are more than 200 people in 7 locations, headquartered in Finland. And we have locations in Southeast Asia, 2 locations, mainly for developers and some business there. And especially in the Middle East, we have 2 locations there in Riyadh and in Dubai, where our main business is. And what are we serving? Our services, we create software, do digital transformation, but we also operate, integrate, and monitor critical systems. We've been in that business since 1998. And the one part of our business is to have integrate with third-party solutions, and SSH is one of those which has been with us, and we've been with them since the beginning of our journey. Now I give the control to David and from SSH to go to the topic. What is privileged access and so on? David?
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. So yeah, thanks very much, Timo, for those kind words of introduction. I am David Wishart. I'm from SSH, and I look after our partnership program and our professional services function. So I'm pleased to be here to talk about privileged access management for both IT and OT environments. I'll explain a little bit about SSH, the company. So our founder, Tatu Julonen, invented the SSH protocol back in 1995 when he was working at Helsinki University in Finland, and he realized his password was compromised on an unencrypted connection. So rather than change his password like most do, he invented the SSH protocol. So this has become the de facto method for IT admins and applications to securely connect to Linux servers, network switches, and also do file transfers. SSH usage is extremely widespread. It's embedded in 95% of the world's operating systems. The use cases of SSH continue to grow with DevOps tools like Git and Jenkins, and configuration and orchestration tools like Chef, Ansible, and Puppet, all using it for authentication. So we continue to be a technology pioneering company with over 100 patents to our name. We serve over 5,000 customers globally, and SSH, the company, now has a wide portfolio of secure access and secure business communications solutions to offer enterprise companies. And today we're going to focus on privileged access management. Now, all of our solutions use cutting edge security technology to provide zero trust, and I'll go into some detail on what that means to us, and post-quantum safe solutions for both IT and operational technology. So our products are designed with high security, modern architecture, and low maintenance as principal guiding factors. Our access management solutions enable passwordless and keyless authentication, and this is very much in line with the Gartner Security Impact Radar. Now, the reason why we're advocating moving towards passwordless and keyless authentication is these are one of the main things that actually are lead to compromise within an IT organization. So first, I'm going to talk about the market drivers in PAM for the IT market and what problems we are trying to fix for our customers. So in the following section, I'll be drawing on some statistics from a survey from a market analyst, Vanson Bourne. And so safe and easy access is, of course, the holy grail for computer security and operations. Oftentimes, security is seen as a hindrance to ease of use, but we believe that it doesn't need to be so. So we've implemented our products in a way that we want to help the end users to do their tasks, and security can actually make things easier, not slow things down. And it's not just easy for the end users. The ease of use should also apply to infrastructure engineers, managers, architects, and CISOs whose job it is to understand the security of their estate. So security is mandated by government and industry body data protection and access laws. And these laws tend to be growing and extending their reach. So there's lots of rules on how companies should handle sensitive data and provide access to their most sensitive assets or most critical assets. And then we ask ourselves, what do we want to tackle? We want to understand and control the secrets in our infrastructure, whether they are passwords or keys or tokens. Because if we don't, then we leave an opportunity to nefarious parties to access our critical infrastructure, our intellectual property, and hold our business as hostage to use our infrastructure to attack others. Often we also delegate the responsibility of having good and secure passwords and within the work environment to our end users. But the reality is that people make mistakes and sometimes they forget. So users come and go. So there's joiners, movers, leavers within your organization. And then there are different hosts and systems and service users that need access. And managing the complexity of different entitlements can become laborsome and quite expensive. And the IT landscape is constantly changing. So if you take developers, for example, back in the day, all you'd have to do is give them access to a few tens of hosts, most of which would be likely in your own data center. But the world has changed. First, we had physical servers, and then those physical servers, they were virtualized, and then the virtualized servers were lifted and shifted into cloud platforms. And now those applications running on those virtual machines have been containerized, and now we're moving towards a serverless architecture. And that's only the infrastructure doing the computation. For your application, the developers need access to code repositories, the CI/CD pipeline components, testing software, and cloud management applications, and not to mention robotic access. So the CI/CD pipelines themselves need to authenticate and access dependent systems and so forth. So there are secrets and credentials all over the place in a typical IT environment. So a very simple example of something that's very important within a CI/CD pipeline is developer access to code repositories. So let's say code repositories in Git. And how is that access most often controlled? So it's typically accessed via SSH keys. So the developer has a private key on their laptop and they upload the public key to the code repository and they authenticate using that. Now, if a malicious party gains access to that private key, they could commit code into that repository in the name of the developer, which ends up being built into the product automatically, which is obviously very concerning. So for most businesses, controlling secure access to privileged accounts on servers, switches, websites, or within your orchestration tools or your CI/CD pipeline is really, really critical. And this is what privileged access management is all about. It's making sure the right people have access to the right resources. Now, also another challenge, which is becoming more important all the time, is enabling privileged access to operational technology. So often between like the maintenance engineers and factory machinery. So the OT protocols used are pretty old and varied and often unencrypted, and they lack sensible authentication schemes. And moving away or upgrading from those is not feasible due to the huge investment made into the industrial system, because the software is quite a small component of that. So as it is disrupting or affecting the communication between the control application on the workstation and the target system in the factory network. So there's even more things that we need to provide secure access to. But the overall challenge, like I mentioned earlier, is how do we make sure that the right persons have access to the right resources on the right level at the right time? Okay, now that's the challenge we face. And now I'm just going to go into a few statistics regarding the importance of privileged access management and the problems we're actually trying to face. So on this slide, there are no real surprises here. We can see that hackers love credentials, especially privileged accounts. And we see this in the more sophisticated tactics that they use. So we see more and more elaborate methods of targeting credentials. We see AI-driven credential harvesting, more complex phishing attempts, and also more complex ransomware. And it's expected that 60% of large and global enterprises and 90% of mid-sized enterprises will implement passwordless methods in more than 50% of their use cases. So that's up from 5% in 2018. So that's a dramatic rise. And we also know that end users knowingly share credentials to provide access, even though they know it's against policy. So what does this mean for a PAM? By removing the passwords or keys on the target servers, we reduce the password compromise. So in order to eliminate passwords and keys on target servers, we would advocate moving towards using just-in-time certificates. So such certificates, they're only issued at the time of connection. They have a very short expiry, and that really significantly reduces the risk of password compromise. And this also ties in with working towards having a highly scalable and immutable architecture, which is also very operationally efficient. And by the way, using ephemeral certificates is not particularly that new, although we are one of the stronger advocates for it. So we have huge tech giants like Facebook, Netflix, and Uber. They all use ephemeral certificate solutions to provide system access. And they are probably like one of the larger compute resource users in the world. And their infrastructure is also all about having very, very high levels of operational efficiency. And that's good for any business. So we fully appreciate that there will be a period of time where you still need to use passwords. And of course, those passwords, they should be vaulted and they should be rotated. But we strongly believe in a just-in-time certificate approach to this is actually the way forward. And in addition to moving away from passwords on target systems, we also see SSH key control as essential to any PAM deployment. So SSH keys can be used to bypass your PAM solution. They have no expiry. They can be self-created and they're not tied to an identity. And SSH keys have been used for over 20 years, and they've been used in a largely ungoverned way. So we see SSH key management as a complementary technology to any PAM solution. And what we can do is actually we can migrate away from using key-based authentication to your target systems to using certificate-based authentication. So your authentication is your authentication certificate is only issued at the time of connection. So the stats on this slide highlight that outsourcing and using third parties can increase your risk. Providing access to third parties, contract workers, or internal employees for remote access all need consideration when deploying PAM solutions. So using VPNs to open up your network for remote access generally provides too much access. Additionally, you want to avoid overloading your VPN so that when you're providing privileged access to critical infrastructure, that's never prevented by the VPN being overloaded. So what does this mean for PAM? A PAM solution for remote access should be flexible enough to be deployed where you need it, whether that's in the cloud or on your perimeter or on premise. It needs to be versatile. Remote working or third-party access should also be granular role-based control to your allowed target accounts. So context-based alerts and heightened authentication challenges like second factor authentication should be activated when needed. We also see AI-driven user behavior analytics integrated with identity management systems becoming much more prevalent. So user behavior analytics will be able to identify when end users are doing their everyday work and reduce the authentication levels required to single sign-on as an example, or increase them with two-factor authentication or biometric challenges if they're doing something strange from an unusual location or at an unusual time. So we've seen, or I've seen firsthand, how long it takes to get new teams and individuals provisioned with access to do their job. I've seen this both in my previous roles when I was working at some very large global financial institutions like Lehman Brothers and Deutsche Bank and UBS, and also in our current role where we're providing professional services to do projects at our customer sites. So it takes a long time for new access to get set up. And often whenever new access is set up, or if someone changes roles, the old access remains in place whenever they've changed roles or whenever they've left the organization. So whenever someone changes a role or leaves the organization, the downstream privileged access should be completely removed in an instant. Essentially, your joiner, mover, leaver process needs to be tightly in sync with your provisioning, deprovisioning of privileged access, and also your provisioning and deprovisioning of servers. So we would advocate that our privileged access is best controlled with the user identity attributes or group membership within a user directory. So every access must be identified to an individual, whether they are an internal employee or external contractor. And that's typically what people refer to as zero trust. You can take this a step further by having no access to privileged accounts on your target systems. Then you integrate your PAM solution with a ticketing system, so you only provide access to the right people on the right server at the right time if they have an approved incident ticket. I appreciate that doesn't work for every use case, but sometimes you will, and sometimes you will need to provide access without a change or incident ticket. But this is an approach worth considering when providing privileged access to your critical infrastructure. The main point that we are advocating is that you ensure an identity authentication happens on every authentication attempt. Stats here reflect the age-old wrestling match between security and operations. So operational support teams want to help their internal and external customers no matter what. Security teams, they want to ensure that they only access the right systems and everything's audited. So no doubt this is a difficult balancing act. I don't know how many times I've heard, just let me do my job, or just put my key on the server, just change the password and I'll fix your problem. So sysadmins, DBAs and engineers, DevOps teams, they're the superheroes, keeping systems up and running, adding new systems for capacity, making config changes for improved performance, and getting rid of old legacy systems. So people in these roles, they just want to get on with their job with as little complication as possible. They want to get their managed hosts, applications, and data in the most secure manner, but also in the most efficient method. Now, if the security controls are cumbersome and slow, then the end users will just bypass security controls and give themselves direct access. That's simple human nature. So therefore, your PAM solution needs to speed up access, not slow it down. You need to having a really intuitive user interface that simplifies the connection process is very important. End users want to be able to get to their target server within a couple of clicks. They want to be able to see the systems they regularly connect to, and they want to see the systems they have access to in a consistent and coherent user interface. And they need to be able to search for the target system and accounts. So implementing single sign-on where you can to authenticate to your PAM system will really help in this respect. In many cases, the users will want to continue using their SSH and RDP clients to make the connections. So it's important that your PAM solution will work with these native desktop tools without too many modifications, because quite often the operational change is much greater than the cost of deployment. So a PAM solution really should speed up access, make things easier, not slow things down, and not make things more complex where possible. So how do we solve these problems? So the basic premise is that users need access to data and resources to perform their jobs. What we can do with our PrivX solution is that we pull users from different identity management systems like Active Directory or LDAP. The users can also be pushed via SCIM, or logins can be federated to an open IDC provider. Based on their identity management system attributes and group memberships, they get mapped into roles. And when a user logs in, we can be sure that the entitlements and authorizations are up to date as they're refreshed at login time and periodically during the session. We, of course, also need targets. So again, hosts are either added manually via the API, pushed via SCIM, or we can index the targets automatically from cloud providers. So at import time, the targets and the target accounts are also mapped into roles. So when a user opens up the browser to our solution and authenticates with their corporate credentials, they can see an up-to-date list of resources they're entitled to access based on their role configuration, and they can make a single click connection via the browser or using native clients. The most important idea is that since the connections go through PrivX, the user never again gets access to the secrets needed to make access to the targets, even if they are not ephemeral tokens. All the user and admin actions are logged, and the connections themselves are stored on disk. So the most important idea is that since the connections go through PrivX, the user never gets access to the secrets that are being used. And then that all the connections going through PrivX are fully recorded and audited. So audit events are subsequently, they can also be sent to external SIMs for alerting and analysis. The other thing we want to do is reduce the number of secrets that you actually have to manage. Our footprint on the workstations is 0. So there are no agents on the clients. We have an SSH, RDP, VNC, and web clients, so you can access directly through our browser experience. We also support connecting in Bastion mode, so you can actually use your native SSH and RDP clients. On the target side, you have no agents to install there, and no configuration changes are needed in the environment to add or remove access. All authentication should be able to be provided using ephemeral access or for ephemeral certificates to SSH and RDP target servers. Although we strongly recommend using ephemeral certificates, we do recognize that in some environments with legacy and more restricted devices, this is not possible. So this is why we support a fully fledged secrets vault and also Vault API. And so these vaulted secrets, they can be rotated if needed. And also they can be used without being exposed to the end users. So what is zero trust? In a nutshell, zero trust states that the trust between entities should never be implicit. In other words, even if both devices are in a secure corporate network, the devices should still mutually authenticate. The client should verify the server, and the server, in addition to authenticating the user, should also confirm the device identity and integrity. So target systems can be configured to either trust the PrivX CA or the secrets in the target system, and they can be configured to PrivX Vault, which also enables immutable deployments. So immutable deployments mean that infrastructure as a code through Terraform or Amazon Cloud Deployment Kit, which in turn means that the target systems after deployment are never accessed or changed outside of the CI/CD pipeline. Then we go back to the point of what happens if a security system or access system is difficult to use. Then people will just figure out ways to bypass them. So in most extreme cases, I've seen developers ordering their own DSL lines to the office for internet connectivity when the corporate network is too restrictive and impossible to work with. Moving to ephemeral certificates enables you to reduce the attack vectors of compromising passwords and compromising SSH keys. Moving to a just enough access. So this means that the role that you're given only gives you the rights to do your job. It shouldn't give you too much privilege. having just-in-time access means that every time you make the connection, you should be authenticated to your identity, and your identity should be mapped to a role, and that role defines what you're allowed to do. And just-in-time also ties into having workflow systems. So you can have an internal workflow system in PrivX that basically provides you access to the right role. You want to have a solution that works not only for server access, but also for network infrastructure, and also for applications, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud, and whether they're operational technology or if they're IT infrastructure. Everything that goes through your PAM should be have the option to be session recorded, and you should also have a full audit event for a list of audit events for all connections going through. And this is becoming more and more important. Having a modern and scalable architecture is vital. So having a system that you can deploy using Kubernetes as an example, and allowing it to be able to grow and auto scale according to the demands, so you don't have to spend so long provisioning PAM solution, is very important to many of our customers. So very quickly, we see the future of authentication as being passwordless. So what you need to do is vault the passwords that you have in use into an encrypted vault so that you limit the access to them. Then any shared passwords that need to be used, you should obfuscate them within the vault so that they can be used to make connections to your target infrastructure. And then any passwords that still exist need to be rotated. You should keep them in the vault and rotate them, but where possible, move to a passwordless world. So this, you have an automatically generated ephemeral certificate for access each time you make the authentication. And similarly for SSH, if you make an inventory of all your SSH keys and trusts that you have, so you know who has access to what using your SSH keys, then you remove the keys that are providing unauthorized access, and then you move into an automated recycling of those keys that are providing authorized access. But then you can also move towards a keyless zero trust connection. So your SSH certificates are issued at the time of connection. So my next slide says questions, but what I'm going to do very quickly is just show you a very quick demo of PrivX, and I'll just show you the user login interface. Okay, so I'm logged into PrivX as a normal end user, so I can see all the recent connections I've made. I can see the roles that I'm a member of, and I can see which requests I've made to request access to a role, and any requests that I need to approve. People that, for example, I might be a role manager. Then I can see my connections very clearly. I can see which connections are for Linux, which connections are for Windows, which connections are for web interfaces. And I can make very simple searches to get to the right. When I'm making this connection, I'm presented with only the servers that allow me to connect to them. So this is the inbuilt SSH client that we have. So we can do our normal Linux commands on the shell. If you want to have multiple sessions here, where, for example, you are running commands here and checking log files here, that's very easy to do. And you can upload files as well. And then if you need to access secrets, for example, maybe you've got an application within a session that you need to have a secret to copy and paste in, then you can use the secrets vault for that as well. All of these are configurable as well, so you can switch these off if needed. Then if you wanted to make an RDP connection, similarly, you would just search for an RDP connection. And then you can select that and make the connection. Now you can connect as either a local administrator, or you can connect as a service admin, or your own user, and PrivX will allow you to log in and do whatever work you need to do. Then if we go back to here, and I'll just disconnect that, and I'll disconnect this. And then we also have our secrets vault, where you can basically see the secrets that you have either read access to or write access to. Now, if we want to, this is now the PrivX admin interface. So this is how PrivX is configured. So what we can see here is where you typically start is the user directories and host directories that you configure. So, and I will start with a user directory. So we can see that this PrivX system is configured to see all the users for an Active Directory system, and we just basically provide the address and port, and also the bind DN. You also have some advanced settings where you can essentially filter out particular users, and then also you can have multi-factor authentication configured here on a directory basis. Okay, so that's configuring directories. So you can configure LDAP, Active Directory, OpenIDC, or SCIM. Then if you want to have a host directory, you can also do that as well. So in the host directory, you can add in, and this basically connects into the cloud APIs for AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and OpenStack. So for example, we have this is a configuration for one of our Active Directory list of servers, our AWS environments. So we can see all the hosts that are built in that directory or that AWS environment. So at the minute there are 44 hosts. So as soon as a new host is built in a host directory, then PrivX knows about it straight away. So this really reduces the time required to keep things operationally efficient. Okay, then in terms of roles, we would just configure a role, and that role would essentially have access to be configured to be like a member of an Active Directory group, or maybe have an attribute from an OpenIDC. For example, you can use tags. So it's very, very easy to configure. Then one thing as well you can do is you can look at recordings of sessions. So we can, for example, I can do a very quick search for when a particular command was run on a system, and then I can see that in the session playback. Okay, so that's our view on privileged access management. I hope that was useful for you.
Yes, thank you, David. If you have any further questions or need to discuss about PrivX or privileged access, SSH products, or any other Oivan services, please contact me or info@oivan.com. Thank you very much indeed.